Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Be last Christmas. Driving to my girlfriend's house 6 hours away. Decide to leave at midnight so we can surprise the family. Be me, GF, and her sister and sister's boyfriend in the car. Driving along at around 3 a.m. Everyone is asleep except me. Middle of rural Texas, no towns or anything for miles. See a car on the side of the road with hazards on. Decide to call the cops, just in case the guy needs help. Right as I pull out my phone, I see some guy walking down the side of the road start slowing down to see if he needs help. Getting closer and see that this dude is at least 7 feet tall. Start feeling a bit antsy. Wake everyone up, just to help calm my nerves a bit. Getting closer and realize it's walking on all fours, almost like a skinny ape. GF yells at me to just keep going and call the police. Agree, but really want to get a better look at this thing. Down to about 5 miles per hour and about to pass by it. All of us look over and realize its face is human. It turns over to look at us, its face is uncanny valley as fuck. Almost iRobot looking. All of us scream and I slam my foot on the gas. It whips its 5 feet long arm at the car and clips the back. Speed the fuck out of there, see it galloping towards us. Lose him in about a minute, but the girls in the car are crying and me and another guy are both freaking out. Finally call the cops and tell them about what happened. Said they'd go check it out. Never found out what happened with that. Still scares me when I think about it. Take a completely different route to get there now, just to avoid that damn stretch of road. Really wish the damn cops had gotten back to me after they figured out what happened.
Be 11 years old. Traveling with mom through the country, following the 40 route. We are getting close to our first destination, which is my mom's hometown. 15K small town surrounded by large farms, we are still another 300 kilometers away. In less than 15 minutes we are surrounded by a very thick fog. Being in the middle of the night we can't see further than 2 meters ahead of us with luck. Nothing unusual so far since we are in the season for such a thing to happen, and it does happen very often in this part of the country. Mom decelerates to 15 kilometers an hour and keeps that speed. Tells me to look around for lights. She wants to stop for a while at a gas station or a truck driver's rest stop. 10 minutes go by and I see a light, but it's kinda weird because it seems to be too far away but still manages to get through the fog, and it's at the sides of the road. It's a straight road, perfectly straight, that's how it was designed in the first place. Tell her. She asks me where and I point. She lowers the speed even more while looking at the light for a whole minute. Then she decides to just keep going and ignore it. I ask her why and she tells me that it's fine, we'll be searching for another place. I keep looking straight at the light, and after some 20 minutes I realize that not only we haven't left it behind, not even a little bit, but also the light is approaching us slowly. Tell my mom and she tells me to ignore it. Tried to ignore it, but it kept drawing my attention. 15 minutes later and it couldn't be more than 5 meters away from the road. Mom is still calm and ignoring it. We see a light a bit ahead of us, and this time it's obviously a gas station. Around 20 meters before we get into the gas station the light suddenly disappears. It doesn't go away, just disappears, like turning off the switch. We stop there, I eat something, mom drinks a coffee, and we wait an hour or so for the fog to lighten a bit before resuming. We get to her town, and on the second day we are staying there with some family I remember and ask her about it. She tells me it was the bad light, an old legend of the region. Basically it's a light that searches for lost or nervous travelers, especially in the fog, and draws them to it. Tries to get them to kill themselves, or actually makes them lost and kills them from starvation and thirst, or makes them fall from bridges or the borders of cliffs to their deaths. It's the soul of a traveler who got lost some 150 years ago, died, and no one ever found its body. Another story that of course nobody knows how we know about it says that said traveler first got lost. When extremely hungry, the devil appeared in front of him and offered him food and water and also guide him out of there in exchange of a couple favors. Traveler accepted and started following the devil. The devil, instead of keeping his part of the deal, decided to make him fall from a cliff during the night, killing him. Since my mother was raised there, she knew the story very well, but says she was never faced with the bad light until that one time we were traveling together. A bit of background: I'm from Argentina, and the 40 route is a route that goes from the northernmost part to the southernmost part of the country right before reaching Tierra del Fuego, where you need to take a ferry to get there. It goes following the Andes mountain range.
Here's some OC. Be about 19 driving home from a friend's one night. It's about 2 a.m. and I'm driving somewhat fast to get home for work the next day. Driving 70 in a 55. The road I take doesn't have lights and it's offbeat, so it doesn't get much traffic or cops. Turn around a bend and see lights approaching. At first I thought they were coming from the other lane. No big. Still at about 70 miles per hour, but within seconds notice the lights swerving into my lane. Holy shit. Immediately brake down to 55 to 50. As I get closer, I notice the lights are not heading toward me, but are actually moving slowly in front of me. Commence WTF.jpg. Continue to slow down to about 35 miles per hour as I'm getting closer to these lights. Notice the dual head backlights I thought I was seeing were actually coming from one source. I continue to creep to 25, somehow still feel like I'm traveling faster than this vehicle in front of me. This whole time I feel incredibly anxious, like I'm about to get into an unavoidable crash. It's dark out, but I finally get close enough to make out the shape of a lantern swaying. What am I seeing? .jpg. I swear to God, it was a faint silhouetted carriage and I drove right through it. Look in the rear view, still see the shape of the carriage and the light from the lantern for about 15 seconds before it fades away. Pulled to the side of the road and got out to inspect. Not a single fucking car or light in sight. Get back in the car and speed home.
Be 18-year-old me with a couple buddies. Went to St. Augustine on a whim. Had fun with Fort and shit. Leave St. Augie at around 1 a.m. GPS takes me on some backwoods journey. 80-mile long road. 2 lanes. No street lights or anything. Woods up to the fucking road. Oh, great fog. All I was thinking was deer. Driving along fine. Friend in back passes out. Passenger seat friend and I chillin', smoking. Road starts to have some hills, which is odd in Florida. Cruising along when I see headlights in the distance. Go downhill. Go uphill. No lights.
Maybe they turned off?
Keep going and we see no roads to turn off. Keep going and still we don't pass a car.
Where the fuck is that car?
At the crest of another hill. See headlights in the distance. 10 minutes later and still we don't pass a car. Passenger Anon is cracking up cause WTF. Friend in back wakes up to noise. Tell him about cars. As we're going up a hill, a huge flash of light occurs. So bright I have to shut my eyes and swerve all over the road. Feel hands on the wheel and
Anon I can fucking see.
Light disappears. Eyes open and we're still on the road, just in the other lane. Immediately noticed the brake lights of a car in the rearview mirror. I asked my friends if it was just a car's brights that blinded us, but they said they had their eyes closed so they couldn't tell. Thing was, we were going up a hill. If another car was coming up on the opposite side of the hill with its brights, the fog would have reflected some light at the top of the hill, making me aware of it. But that didn't happen. Paranormal or not, it was spoopy.
Be me, 12-year-old Brit on my first trip to America. Obviously we went to Disneyland. About 6 days into the holiday we went to that downtown Disney place with all the restaurants and stuff, went to the Rainforest Cafe, fucking great. By this point we were all adjusted to the fact that around 4 to 5 p.m. it rains like all fuck, but there'd been a storm warning in the morning so we opted to set off early to beat the rain. Either way, we left the cafe at 3:30 to a downpour. Somehow made it back to the car through the rain. Soaked through, 6-year-old sister complained to high heaven that her new dress got rained on. We set off on the hour-and-a-half drive back. About 20 minutes in, we see this streak of lightning touchdown, somewhere to our left. Thunderclap not 2 seconds later. Hear my mom say holy shit over my MP3 player. Take out one headphone. Sister does the same. She's white as a sheet, terrified. It's not even 4 yet, but it's pitch black outside. The clouds and rain are so dense that Dad's slowed to about 20 miles per hour. This is what sets me on edge. He's the safest driver I know. He took my mom to hospital at 2 in the morning, on country back roads, averaging 90 in a fucking van when she was in labor with my sister. He's never afraid of driving, ever. Lightning hits again, same place, thunder rolls. My sister is trembling. I end up holding her hand, one headphone in each from our respective MP3 players, watching the lightning hit. At around 4:30 we have to stop completely, the rain's so heavy it's like being underwater. The radio is off so my dad can concentrate, again, not right for him at all. About a minute later, my MP3 stopped working. Can't get it to turn on, and I just put a new battery in. Sister taps my arm. Hers has stopped too. I've never seen anyone so scared. Give her hand a squeeze, opt to listen to the rain. Car is silent, parents don't say a word, and neither do we. I'm doing that thing where you count the seconds between lightning and thunder to guess how far away it is. Sister is too, I can see her counting her fingers. The lightning is touching down everywhere, all directions, at random intervals. Rain is at its heaviest at this point. Dad breaks the silence to tell us he's going to pull off the road. He doesn't feel right about staying on the road when we aren't moving. He pulls over, slowly and totally blind, but he gets there. Can't hear anything over the rain and thunder. After a couple of minutes of silence, Sister squeezes my hand. I look over at her, her eyebrows are knitted together in worry, peering out the window. And in that second, I swear to God the lightning struck and I hear a faint groan of agony over the thunder. Keep replaying the sound in my head, trying to figure out if I did hear it or not before I look back at my sister and see she's staring, wide-eyed, out of the windscreen. And again, as the lightning hits, I hear a sound. A horrific, blood-curdling scream. We all heard it. I saw my mom look at my dad. She was as wide-eyed and pale as my sister. That scream seems to echo on forever, over the sound of the rain, before I realize I'm just replaying it in my head. Over the next 10 minutes my mind just went into overdrive. I would swear I heard that scream or groan over every thunderclap, warped by my own mind into this horrifying death scream. I kept seeing blurry figures through the rain, backlit by the lightning. My sister was holding onto my hand so tightly that it hurt, but I couldn't let go. The concept of letting go of her terrified me more than anything else. The rain lets up a little about 15 minutes after that first scream, and Dad sets off again at that slow pace. And then, another 10 minutes later, we come to this abrupt stop. There's a car in front of us. Parked at an odd angle. Dad gives it a couple of minutes before setting off to go around it. But there are more cars. It's a 3-car pileup. The one in the middle is obliterated. The ones on either end are both wrecked too. Dad wants to get out of the car to see what's going on. Mom grips his arm, her nails draw fucking blood as she tells him to stay in the car. We'll call the police when we get out of the rain. They argue for a couple of minutes, maybe more. Mom wins. We carry on a little further. There's another car, all doors open, and a huge group of people gathered around it, all huddled together in the glow of the inner lights. Dad gets out and asks what's going on, much to my mom's protests. Still holding my sister's hand, I lean across to get a better look. About 5 paces from the car, just within reach of the taillights, there's a woman sitting on the floor with a blanket around her shoulders, drenched to the bone. She's staring straight down the road, in the direction of the crash. She barely blinks, doesn't move when a guy from the group comes over and crouches down next to her, except to brush his hand off her arm when he tries to get her to get up. Dad returns. The police have already been called, the people around the car were in the crash. I want to ask about the woman, but by this point I'm struggling with keeping my breathing under control and couldn't even consider forming a sentence. We get back on the road to home. As the rain clears up, I find that my MP3 player is working again. My sister calms down the further away we get. We finally made it back to our villa around 6. We're all calmer, but my dad is visibly shaken still. Me and my sister both went to bed early, but I gave her the biggest hug of my life before I said goodnight and we went to our rooms. I barely got any sleep that night. I kept replaying those sounds and seeing that woman. By the looks of everyone the next morning, so did they. A couple of years later, when I was 15, I remembered that incident. The sounds and images were just as vivid as the day I experienced them, but we hadn't really talked about it since. So I asked my mom about it, as we'd just booked another trip to Florida. When me and my sister had gone to bed, Dad had told her what the group around the car had actually said. The crash had happened while we were parked at the side of the road. The middle car hadn't seen the first parked in the road through the rain. The impact trapped the driver's legs, but the passenger escaped. But the third car made the same mistake, hit the middle car with so much force that it crushed it. We were close enough to have seen this on a clear day. Somehow, in the rain, we didn't hear 2 cars pass us and hit each other. But we did hear a woman scream in horror as she watched her husband be crushed to death in his car. Thinking back on it, if Dad hadn't pulled off the road, that could have been us. The fact that we didn't hear anything from the crash but that scream is so bizarre, but both that woman's face and that scream were in my nightmares for weeks afterward. The only thing that she didn't mention was that initial groan me and my sister heard, but I chalk that up to her either not hearing it, or it not being real. I didn't bring it up. But there's some part of me that's been on X too long, that makes me believe that was the final groan of that poor woman's husband, waking up from the impact of a car crash, minutes before he died.
Be about 18, 10 years ago, bored as shit hanging out with a friend. We decided to go for a drive. Live in a rural town, so there's hundreds of dirt roads around the place to explore. Probably been driving for an hour in his ute all over the place. Head out to one of the mountain roads. It's a really windy one with dozens of hairpins. The road is long, so we probably drive it for 20 to 30 minutes before deciding it's boring and turning around. Not 30 seconds after heading back, an old beat-up piece of shit comes screaming up behind us. To me it looked pick-related. Probably not this model or make, but it was definitely an old pickup like that. I was thinking of my dad's old Dodge tow truck at the time. We're cocky young blokes, so my friend hits the gas. Sliding out on every corner, absolutely flying down the mountain. This guy cannot be shaken. Keep up easy as you please. Takes all of 10 minutes to get back down to the bottom. As soon as we hit a flat road and get past the treeline, this guy stops, turns around and heads back up the mountain. The hills have eyes, kids.
I was on a cross-country road trip with a colleague. We were driving through West Texas on a major highway. In the area where we were, even the major highway was pretty desolate. There had been a truck stop or gas station about every 100 miles, and every one of them was solitary with no other buildings in sight. These weren't really towns, the exits, just places to get more gas to get to the next gas station. It was pretty late at night, and she had been driving for like 4 hours. I usually can drive for about 8 before I'm tired out. I go on frequent road trips, but she could only manage 4 or 5 before it was my turn again. We were also getting low on gas, at about a quarter tank, and you learn from road travel to fill up when you get the chance. So she was looking for a gas station as we drove along. It's really corny, but we were talking about fate and destiny and some other weird shit at the time. That kind of conversation gets me keyed up and worried, so I was trying to change the subject. She took an exit while we were talking, and I got out my coffee mug so I could fill up for my turn driving. We pulled into a typical Nowheresville gas station, just the station and a trailer out back. I assume, thinking back, it was probably where the people who owned it lived. There was another car parked in front of the doors off to one side. We got out, still talking, and walked up to the double doors, each of us grabbing a door handle. The doors were locked. I turned and looked around to see if there was a sign. Sometimes places will put up a "back in 5 minutes, and noticed several things in succession. The coffee maker inside was halfway done brewing a fresh pot of coffee. The monitors that showed the store were visible from outside, where we were, but all of them were showing static, and there was a splash of bright red on the door in the back of the place, which was closed. I suddenly realized I was looking at a huge streak of blood, with handprints in it. Every hair on my neck stood up. My friend began shaking the door, yelling,
"We need to get gas."
But I had already turned and walked away from the doors. "We have to leave now." I grabbed her arm and started propelling her back to the car. Now I noticed the other car in the lot. It had no plates. It was dingy and had dents. There was an empty gun rack in the window of it. I ran to the car, dragging her with me. She seemed to take forever to open her door and get in. She had the keys still. The whole time she kept saying, "But we need gas." While I tried to explain to her, "There's blood in there." Blood. After what seemed like a year, she pulled the car out. When we were backing up, I saw through the windows that the back door in the gas station was opening. We had pulled away before anyone came out, thankfully. I freaked out until we were 20 miles down the highway. I tried to call the police but had no signal. I didn't get a phone signal until we had driven about 40 miles and got to a truck stop. Again, not in a town, just a building on its own in the middle of nothingness. I called the cops, they thanked me, and I never heard anything more about it. To this day I feel like if I hadn't freaked out, we probably would have met the robber or whoever was in the back room of the place. I also wish I had been able to find out what the hell had happened there. It was a Chevron station, somewhere in the western part of Texas. At least, within about 100 miles or so of the signs for those places, on Route 10, never have heard back. This all happened in 2002.
About 4 or 5 years back, I'm around 17. I used to live with my folks way out in the middle of nowhere. Used to be an hour-long drive for me just to get to school. Hanging out at a friend's house late one night, have to go back home instead of just passing out there. I forgot why though. Driving home, about 15 minutes away from my house. The only other home in the area is a white 3-story Victorian style. Never noticed anything creepy about this place before, despite the fact that it's a Victorian house in Florida. Never seems to be any cars in the driveway though. There are so few people nearby. Our mailbox is 15 miles away. It's like an apartment mailbox in the middle of nowhere, and it happens to be about 100 feet away from their house. Mom sent me a text asking me to pick up the mail on the way home. Stop at around 3 in the morning to get mail in the spoopy woods. The only thing lighting the way is a single street lamp. Get a weird feeling. The air gets colder. I hustle to get the mail out and get back in my car. I turn on the corner that the Victorian house is on. I get a cold shiver down my spine and feel something is terribly wrong. I woke up and almost started crying and shaking for no reason. For just a flash of a second, my headlights reflect off a pale white woman in front of my car, in a long white gown. As I hit the apparition, it fades away. As expected, I'm a little freaked out and speeding to get to my house.
I make the 15-minute drive an 8-minute drive. I lived in a mother-in-law suite on my parents' property. It was awesome to have friends over on rare occasions and smoking weed, but almost a mile away from the other house. We lived on a bunch of property. I pull into the driveway, run to the mother-in-law suite, lock my door, sit my ass down on 4chan and post this story on X, put on some music and text a friend to kind of laugh it off, feel better. All of a sudden, my speakers start crackling and popping like they never had before. Connections are fine, let's not get carried away. Loud ass banging on my front door. Bam bam bam. I am a little girl, so I get under my covers. It only banged that couple of times. I convince myself it's a hanging tree limb hitting against my window. This might be a coincidence, but then this happened later that morning. Get a call at 8 a.m. It's my dad. Goddamn it, Pops, I need to get some sleep. I answered it. Don't go outside. Immediately awake and spooked again. There is a bear sitting outside your front door. Look out my window. Lo and behold, a large black bear is sitting pretty much right in front of my door. Not really sitting, but pacing back and forth. Must have paced in the same line for 10 minutes or so. My dad comes out with a shotgun, fires a round in its direction, it runs off. Well, that's it. I know it's not the most intriguing or climactic, but I was more scared than I ever have been.
Before or 5, driving up to my Uncle Milo's farm with my parents for a week that included the 4th of July and my birthday. I was absolutely ecstatic the whole way. Several of Milo's kids are at my grandparents' cabin way the fuck in the up Michigan, 200+ mile detour. We had to go pick them up. Dad decided to bug off to the farm with my brother because going up there would be a mission and it was already getting dark. Plus I was being obnoxious. My mother and I take the truck and drive up through the heavily forested boulder-ridden hills and old rock formations around the cabin. Full moon, stars still breathtaking due to distance from any cities. About 30 miles from the cabin, approaching a ridgeline overlooking a small lake. Coming around bend, 3 baby bears come booking it straight down the road. Can hear their wailing even in the truck. Mom slows down and puts on her brights. Mama bear can't be too far. I loved to observe animals and think about them. After a few minutes of driving slowly, guess we missed Mama bear. Start up the incline that led up the bluff, turn a corner. There's a huge owl in the middle of the road that ruffles its wings and stares into the brights, which she switched to low after we spotted it. Mom slows down to a crawl and honks at it about 10 feet away. The owl keeps staring, and turns its head slightly. Flies up suddenly and scrapes the windshield lightly with its claws, causing me to scream like a bitch. Spooked.jpg. Continue on. Road is fairly new. Can tell the bluff had been neatly cut by explosives and the local ecosystem hadn't relocated on top of it yet. Road feels really barren and devoid of life. Mom continues at a mediocre pace due to the spoop and just 10 feet of rock and dirt in place of a guardrail between us and a several dozen-foot cliff. On the way down the cliff, a small landslide had blocked part of the road with rocks and a small tree. Mom stops the truck and tells me she's going to go pull the tree out of the road. She's a strong woman, reaches across to the glove compartment and pulls out this gigantic chrome handgun in a holster. Straps it on her hip and opens the door. Successfully pulls the tree over the cliff and it slides down into the foliage. Walks back to the truck and climbs in. When the door slams, she lets out this shriek. Hits the gas and jets forward. At the same time I hear another horrifying sound that sets me on edge. I don't know how else to describe it other than screaming, but like, inhaling instead of exhaling. Truck swipes a boulder and knocks out a headlight shortly after, slowing us down. What the fuck is going on? I look through the back window. Mom tells me to close my eyes. Fuck that. Fuck. Gigantic bear hauling ass towards us as the heavy truck struggles to get speed. Scream. It makes this weird inhale scream again. Realize its head is wrong. Its face was bony and bloody ragged. Looked more like molting antlers than a bear face, except it was shaped like a bear. And its fucking mouth. I thought it had eaten a porcupine and gotten horribly mangled by quills. When I realized they were fucking teeth, I remember it so damn vividly. Scream and close my eyes. Mom tells me to hit the floor. Mom, still driving, pulls out the handgun and shoots twice. First one misses. Second time I could hear material get ripped from the thing's mass. Thing shrieks again. Hit a sharp turn. The road goes between two hills and another cut bluff. Mom scrapes the wall and breaks off the side mirror on the passenger side. Mom floors it down the hill. Things are still galloping towards us. Road corrects north. We see it follow around the curve as the road straightens out. Eventually lose it in the darkness and shadow coming from the trees. Neither of us spoke till we got to the cabin. My grandmother took one look at the vehicle, asked if we had seen the owl. My mom said yes and Grandma tutted.
Owls are seen as messengers or omens of death and warning. I live in the Lower Peninsula. My pops told me a story about how an owl may have saved his life. He's native and superstitious, but it seemed bizarre. Dad alone, speeding on backwoods highway at night. Likes to go 80 plus, blast through intersections if sight lines are good. Feels something is wrong. Slows to 70, clenches the wheel. Feeling persists. Decides to open the window and let the brash wind distract him. Continues on at 70 with windows open, falls into a groove. Feels odd again, the wind sounds different even. Slows down again to 60, almost believes some ninja cop is on his ass. Laughs off the thought, then lets out a yelp. An owl swoops down and flies in front of his vehicle, outdistancing him at a constant dozen meters or so. Dad kind of paralyzed at this owl, didn't think it was possible for them to fly so quickly. Owl suddenly loops up, snapping its head back to stare at him and does an inversion, diving past the driver's side. Dad says the owl locked eyes with him the second it turned around, and just felt scared. The owl flies so close that its wing brushes the mirror and a feather flies in, sticking to my dad's neck, maintaining eye contact. In that time of the owl swooping in, he slammed the brakes, quite frightened. Turned to look behind, no sign of the owl. Slaps the feather off his neck and looks forward. Literally 30 to 40 deer running towards him on the road. A couple stop and stare at the bright lights, rest keep running. 2 minutes straight, the deer ran past him. Sits there with his hands on the wheel, staring at all the deer. Eventually continues onward but doesn't exceed 60 miles per hour for the rest of the trip. Sees 2 cops and a deputy posted out in the middle of the night for some reason. Amazed they didn't chew his ass out for driving while native. Dad figures the owl warned him both about the deer, which he couldn't explain, and the cops ahead.
I got one from my dad. Be dad, years ago and still young. Him and friends pile into the car for a road trip into Virginia. Driving up, high into the mountains and woods. Having a good time. It gets dark and there's a sudden heavy rainstorm. Raining so hard that Dad can't even see the road, let alone drive. Drives blind for a while, sees a bright light up ahead. Dad drives to the light, thinking it was a street light. Parks in front of light. Sitting in the car, waiting for rain to die down. When a humanoid shadow enters light. Dad and friends staring in awe of the shadow, thinking Dad crashed the car and they saw an angel. They keep looking at the shadow, rain finally dies down and see what it actually is. It's an old man. Dad drove through this old man's yard and parked right in front of his living room window. Dad, friends, and an old man stare at each other for a second. Dad backs up the car, cuts 2 donuts in the yard and floored it out of there.
1 week end videos to help you sit back and get spooked. TimeSix narrates stories from our pet pals over at Foshan. He covers insane, gory, deranged, and downright depressing Greentext. If interested, why not check out one of our partners, TimeSix. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.